The Good Society Question Time event. As you can see, I'm not David Dimbleby, and Fern Britton sends her apologies. But we have an excellent panel. My name is Mehdi Hasan. I'm from the New Statesman. I'm chairing today. I'll be trying to chair an excellent panel to discuss building the good society with you. I'll introduce the panelists, and then we will basically kick off with lots of questions, because this is the event where you ask lots of questions. These guys will try and answer those questions. I will try and oversee it all like a circus master without wild animals. On our panel today, we have Toynbee, columnist at The Guardian since, I think, 1998, won heaps of Columnist of the Year awards, former social affairs editor at the BBC, author of several books on politics and current affairs, including Hard Work, and most recently the book she co-authored, The Verdict Did Labour Change Britain. On the other end, or two away from me, is Baroness Ruth Lister, or Lord Ruth Lister, as she was recently greeted in the House of Lords by her peg. Professor of Social Policy at Loughborough University since 1994. She's served on the National Equality Panel. She's the honorary president of the Child Poverty Action Group. She's one of the country's leading experts on welfare reform and social mobility. John Harris is a Guardian columnist and writer and author of, I think, 3 books. He writes on a variety of topics, from politics to popular culture to music. He co-authored an essay with Neil Lawson in my magazine, The New Statesman, in December, arguing that the centre-left has to be based around the good society. Caroline Lucas is the leader of the Green Party, former MEP, the Greens' only and first Member of Parliament, elected in the Brighton Pavilion seat last May, and in November she won Newcomer of the Year at the Spectator's Parliamentarian of the Year Awards. Chuka Umunna was also elected last May as Labour MP for Streatham. I won't introduce him, as I always do, as Britain's Barack Obama, because that would just embarrass him, so I won't do that. He is a former employment lawyer. He was Parliamentary Private Secretary to Ed Miliband until last month, when he was promoted to be a shadow business minister. I think it's safe to say he's one of the party's rising stars. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades, your panel. I've been asked by the pluralists at Compass to divide this into a very strict 4-section event, in which we will take questions from the audience along 4 areas, and I'll tell you what they are first, just to keep it orderly. Building the good society and democracy. What would you like to say? What would you like to ask about how we make it more democratic? Perhaps questions about electoral reform, given the catastrophic defeat in May. Building the good society and equality. A lot of the fringes and a lot of the seminars and events today have been talking about some of the paradoxes involving the state, society, enforcing equality. Building the good society and sustainability. Where does climate change fit into all of this? Some of you may have seen Al Gore's 7,000-word attack on Barack Obama in Rolling Stone magazine recently about the lack of a politics of climate change. And fourthly, and finally, building the good society and organising the movement. Ed Miliband's giving a speech, or has given a speech in Wrexham today, talking about turning the party into a movement. How do you organise and build a good society? So, without any further ado, I'm going to take 6 questions from the audience. The panel can answer as many or as few as they like. They're limited to 2 minutes each. Can we take some questions on democracy and what we do about democratising Britain? We'll start with this gentleman here in the front row.
Andrew Willoughby, Community Wellbeing. In terms of democratising the Labor Party, I'm very interested in how we build participatory democracy, because I think there's room to put participatory democracy into every community, involving high school students as well as adults, building lots of social capital, building ecological capital, but empowering people and institutionalising this underneath representative democracy. We don't have to change any laws to put it in place.
Okay. Can we take the gentleman just behind him? Keep your hands up if you do want to ask us. I can see where you are.
I'm not sure which of the categories this fits into, but I'm keying on the word democracy in the context of current events in Greece, and I want to know what the panel think the Greeks should do.
That is a lovely segue. That is a lovely segue. Can we take the gentleman there in the blue jumper?
Hello. Campaign for an English Parliament. Considering that Labour's been knocked out, really, of Scotland, how does Labour reconnect with the people of England? Do you disagree with the fact we've got 108 MPs voting on purely English matters from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, such as tuition fees? How would you correct that situation as well?
Okay, lady to your right.
In view of Ed Miliband's move today to try and choose a shadow cabinet, did the panel think that's a democratic move towards a good society or not?
Good question on the shadow cabinet elections. Should we go at the back? Gentleman in the blue shirt at the back there.
Thank you. I'm John Courtnidge. My question to the panellists and perhaps for the chair to ask the room is, are you a democratic socialist or are you a social democrat? And in your answer, perhaps you'll define for us what you understand by that term.
So you've really followed the guidance on questions there. And number 6, the 6th question. Let's have a woman. Is a woman want to ask a question about democracy? Right here in the front. Lady here in the 3rd row. There's a mic to your left there.
Oh, hello, Carol Wilcox, Labour Land Campaign. I'd like to ask, in the name of democracy, why the land registry is only 55% complete. Shouldn't we know who owns the land of Britain?
I saw what you did there. In the name of democracy. Very clever. All right, we're going to throw it open to the panel. I'm going to ask Mr. Harris, because he's nearest to me, to come in first. Take as many or as few as you like. You've got 2 minutes.
There was a stand-up comedian called Ted Chippington. He used to say, anyone got any subject for jokes? And all his jokes began, I was walking down the street. So someone would shout shoes, and he'd go, I was walking down the street in some shoes, and then tell the joke anyway. What's just happened rather reminds me of that. I'll take a few of those. I just came from a very interesting session which was ostensibly about how to revive the campaign, for political reform after the defeat in the AV referendum. And I was quite surprised. I thought it would be an absolute bleak fest, as a great deal of left-wing gatherings are at the moment, encouraged by bleak columns written by people like me. But it wasn't like that at all. And one of the way the conversation fell was we talked a lot about the fact that the future necessarily is local. It's local for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we won't be able to travel as far as we would like. If the debate about climate change goes the right way, but also because I think in a political system that's as broken and busted as ours is, one of the ways that people can feel they're making some headway is by changing things locally. So I think you're absolutely right, sir, but I would disagree with you. I would say you do have to change laws. I want a more participatory system of local government. I think some of this has started to happen in isolated pockets across Britain. We talked a lot about Totnes in Devon. Where I live in Somerset, the town council has just been taken over by a coalition of independents who'd had enough of the Lib Dems, and they're brilliant. But if any of that's going to mean anything, we have to restore power to local government in this country. It's something that comes up whenever people of this political persuasion get together, but I think it's absolutely necessary. We've got the most centralised political system, I think, in the industrialised world, and it's a joke, and that has to change. Shadow cabinet elections, I'm sort of indifferent about this, really. It doesn't apply to the Labour Party when it's in government. I'm much more dismayed about the fact that an elected party chair seemed to be a matter of consensus during the leadership election, and that seems to have died a death, and I'm not quite sure why. I think an elected party chair is a necessary prerequisite of doing anything to democratise and reinvigorate the Labour Party. And then on this question, am I a democratic socialist or a social democrat? I said I was a socialist until I started hanging around with sophisticated London people, many of whom were from Compass, and they told me to pretty much to say I was a social democrat because it didn't scare the horses. So I stuck with that for a while. And because Tony Blair definitely wasn't one, that made it okay. Although someone said to me in relation to the politics of Western Europe, with Tony Blair, Christian Democrat would have been a start. I think what I actually am is a liberal socialist, because my politics have 2 aspects. I think the market is out of control. I think capital needs reining in, which is something we'll have to do on an international level. So there's that part of my politics. I also believe in equality, which is definitely socialist, but I also think a bit that's often missed out of our politics is about sclerotic, distant, alienating states. I think the Labour Party's recurrent blind spot in the last 13 years, among countless others, was civil liberties, and therefore that makes me a liberal socialist for today.
I'm going to bring in Polly next, because Polly, you started a party with a name which goes to the heart of that question.
I've always been a social democrat. I'm still a social democrat. It simply recognises the reality of capitalism, but wants good capitalism, perhaps along the sorts of lines that Will Hutton had suggested right at the beginning in 1996, which New Labour briefly embraced and then immediately forgot about. Participatory democracy, localism. It's all very attractive, and it's absolutely flavour of the month, particularly perhaps in some ways amongst the left desperately looking for some other way out, and because the left will do better in local elections with a Conservative Party in power. I think we should be very careful of it. I am very cautious about localism. This government is using it as a fig leaf for absolutely everything. You know, you want local, you have local. Here's an inadequate sum of money with which to do even statutory things. It's all down to you locally, nothing to do with us. Localism is a recipe for the kind of inequality that people on the left are strongly against. We are going to see huge amounts of, postcode lottery won't be in it, vast variations in services around the country. And, Francis Maud and Oliver Letwin are all very pleased with the idea of that. I think that actually people on the left have to hold on to a certain amount of centrism and stand up against those who say that's just Stalinism, because we know that fairness means redistribution. If the Tories go ahead with giving all local councils back, for instance, their business rates, so the City of London could keep their fantastic sums of money, Westminster can keep theirs, instead of, as at present, being collected centrally and then redistributed according to need locally, that would be a very bad thing. There is good localism about the very, very local, and people really making decisions about what's happening in their streets, in their areas, and maybe being given sums of money. And I like the idea of parish councils springing up in London, but let's be very wary of it.
Okay. Caroline, what do we do about Greece?
Oh, yeah.
Glad you asked me that. Well, I think that what's happening in Greece just demonstrates that the way that you tackle the deficit is not by throwing millions of public sector workers out of work. It's not by hitting the poorest hardest. It's not by the incredibly stringent measures that Greece is pursuing and which Cameron would pursue as well if we gave him half a chance. So what I think Greece should be doing is negotiating, and I underline negotiating, but working out a way of leaving the single currency. It was never going to work. You know, if you've got economies of such wide variation, the idea that one single set of interest rates was going to suit all of those countries at all of the time was utter madness. And you can see that without complete political union, it might work then, but without complete political union, and I think there's lots of democratic reasons why we might not want complete democratic union, it simply was not going to work the way it is now, and I think Greece just demonstrates that, so I hope very much they will try to negotiate a way out of it. I wanted to pick up just a couple of the other questions. On the land registry, completely agree with the lady who raised that point. Of course, the royal family has an awful lot of land, and I think we should know who else has it, and I think we should be redistributing it. And I think that one step towards that would be through a land value tax. I think we should be stopping the speculation on land. I'm rushing through these really fast because I'm aware 2 minutes isn't very long. On these labels, I mean, that's the beauty of green, because I just say I'm a green, and then I don't have to define all my social democratic...
But are you a green socialist or a green social democrat?
Well, I am a green, and for me, greens incorporate the ideas that I understand by socialism. And if you want to know what I understand by socialism, then maybe that's another seminar for a couple of hours at the end of this. But it seems to me that green politics does incorporate socialism, so I don't feel the need to put that word after it, but we can discuss. Ed Miliband choosing his cabinet, I just wanted to say on that what bothers me more than that issue, and that's for him and the Labour Party to sort out really, is the way in which the whips in Parliament decide who's going to sit on select committees, and so they deliberately pick people who are less likely to be thinking for themselves. There's the perfect example of Sarah Wollaston, who was the MP in Totnes, the Tory who was elected through a primary, so she was perhaps more independently minded than many other MPs. She was elected, she believes, because of her expertise in health. She is a GP. She was stopped from going on the Health Select Committee. Instead, it was suggested to her that she should go on to some committee looking at double taxation in the Cayman Islands. She replied, I have difficulty enough looking at single taxation in Britain. They replied, that's fantastic. All we want you to do is to vote the right way. I rest my case.
And I know we're short of time, but I've got to ask this question. If the numbers had been there for a rainbow coalition, would you have taken a seat in a Labour-led cabinet under Gordon Brown, just out of interest? I've been waiting a year to ask you that. Would you have been Secretary of State for Transport?